Hi, I'm Roger Barnes. I'll be providing an update on Phase 2 of the project titled Indigenous Groups Land Rehabilitation and Mine Closure. This is a UQ-funded project under the Sustainable Minerals Institute's Social Aspects of Mine Closure Research Consortium. This project is investigating ways in which Indigenous groups are working with mining companies on mine environmental management and rehabilitation across Australia. Last year's report and narrated PowerPoint are available on the website mineclosure.net. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara peoples and pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue to hold spiritual and cultural connections to this land we're on here at UQ. Phase 1 of the research project involved a rapid appraisal of 4 mine sites across regional and remote Australia. The first was Jundee, near Wiluna in the Western Australian goldfields, and I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Mardu people. The second was Tanami, another gold mine in the Northern Territory's Tanami Desert. I acknowledge the Warlpiri landowners there. Thirdly, Woodcutters, where mining is finished, is located in the top end of the Northern Territory. I acknowledge the Warai and Kungurukung peoples, the traditional owners of Woodcutters Mine. And last but not least is Amrun, a new bauxite mine in far north Queensland, which is part of Rio Tinto's Weipa operations. I also acknowledge the traditional owners there, the Wikwaya people. This is action research, intended to enliven this domain as a way to increase opportunities for participation of local Indigenous peoples, especially from the land-owning groups. Using these 4 case studies, we examined the opportunities for local Indigenous groups to conduct fee-for-service environmental management and rehabilitation work on the mining footprint. We found at each site there were innovative examples of engagement in the domain of environmental management and land rehabilitation. Through Phase 1 we established an evidence base for a range of exciting outcomes. These were found at the Mining Company Indigenous Engagement Interface, as well as positive outcomes for the respective mining companies and Indigenous groups themselves, along with important positive structural and national level outcomes. Drawing on these findings, we were able to conclude with a degree of confidence that such engagement offers an effective way for mining companies to meet their environmental and social performance obligations and at the same time improve participation and create opportunities for neighbouring Indigenous communities. As such, further research was justified into understanding the mechanisms for enhancing the available benefits. Phase 2 entailed building on knowledge gained from the 2019 study, specifically to gain deeper insights and to also address the study's limitations. A key aim of Phase 2 was to communicate the findings, particularly to the Indigenous participants of the study. Even though the findings were reported publicly through the consortium webpage, the emphasis of Phase 2 is on Indigenous groups, as the written technical report was recognised as not the most accessible format for reaching Indigenous participants. The Phase 2 plan was to package the findings in an interesting and engaging format, then use a participatory approach to report back on the findings at each site. Through this engagement, the findings could be validated or otherwise adjusted based on participatory feedback sessions from the Indigenous participants themselves. Of course, these plans to report back on the findings were thrown into disarray with the advent of COVID. On the 28th of January 2020, the Queensland Government declared a public health emergency following the first confirmed case of novel coronavirus at the Gold Coast. From February 1, the federal government progressively introduced international travel restrictions, as well as a ban on travel into remote Indigenous communities under federal biosecurity laws. Shutdown of non-essential services followed, with Queensland state borders closed from the 24th of March, clearly undermining the participatory essence of Phase 2 planning. As with so many other sectors, we had to pivot to online delivery methods. This was no mean feat, communicating not only across the internet, but also in a cross-cultural setting. CSRM researcher Dr. Sandy Warden, who holds technical communication expertise, was brought in to help design and implement Phase 2. Using a strategic communication planning process, we arrived at an approach based around two key elements. The first was to develop a package that could be delivered remotely. A fundamental aspect of this work was to distill the findings into plain English and readily accessible concepts. A professional illustrator was commissioned to develop media or communication collateral that Indigenous participants could relate to, and it being sufficiently engaging to foster interest in our research and stimulate thoughtful responses. To allow participants to connect more readily with us, to actually see who we are, rather than be anonymous university researchers, we produced two short videos speaking to camera. The first video presents the Phase 1 research findings. The second video delivers a 10-question feedback session, or what we call group chat. These tools were designed to be either used remotely or delivered via a teleconference platform. The strategy was enabled by building on the relationships developed with stakeholders through Phase 1, as on-site facilitators are required to conduct the sessions. As at November 1, 2020, we have conducted sessions related to two of the case studies. One remotely by the on-site facilitator themselves, and one via teleconference with Sandy and myself. Scheduling of sessions at the other two cases are underway, with one being subject to easing of Western Australian border restrictions. The data we have been able to acquire so far is tantalising. Certain findings are validated. For others, the additional insights provide nuance and deeper understandings that either qualify our original findings or point to conditions necessary to achieve those positive outcomes. Diversity of work that Indigenous groups undertake on the mining footprint is one example. Here we learned that Phase 1 outcomes of skills development are contingent on mining companies engaging Indigenous workers on substantive environment work, not just tedious tasks such as endless weeding or picking up rubbish. While such findings suggest the need for improved planning and professionally scoped work programs, it may also point to companies underestimating the skills and collective talent of Indigenous groups that are offering fee-for-service work. Though this would have to be tested through further interviews, if this is the case, then this is an important constraint to recognise, which should be further investigated. These and other findings would be subject of a further report once we have exhausted opportunities to engage Indigenous groups through the reporting back and feedback package we have now developed. To do this, we need more time, through into 2021. It is overwhelmingly apparent through our efforts this year to secure case study participants that everyone is very busy and consumed with responding to the new normal under COVID. Working remotely from these groups, we are not in a position to press them to prioritise our research, nor are we wanting to put additional pressure on them. Continuing our effort through into next year, we feel will be clearly worthwhile in terms of securing Phase 2 research outcomes. Thank you.